Hey everyone, it's John from Evolve. We want to take a look at a Model X structural repair and kind of walk you through some of the challenging things with Model X, as well as some tips and tricks when it comes repairing many of the components of the vehicle. So, as you can see in our pictures here, this one's hit pretty hard in the front, and we're going to bring this thing in and start to do a disassembly on the vehicle so that we can go further into what's actually wrong with it. As you can see, magically, we've got our front end disassembled partially. We got a little more work to do here on this vehicle. But a few things that I want to point out while we're looking here is, again, we've got a front gigacasting assembly back here, and then forward of that, we've got things like frame rails. Pretty interesting once you remove the very simple sheet metal on this vehicle, kind of what's left. We're looking at the thermal management system in a Model X here. We're also looking at components of the air suspension system up in here. But pretty astonishing to see what's actually not here once you take the front end of the vehicle apart. But one of the main things on this Model X that we'll take a look at is these front frame rails here and here. Now they're both bent and they're out of spec. We're going to actually replace these rails on this vehicle, which is a pretty extensive repair, but I want to walk you through that process and what it actually looks like. One thing to note, and we'll get again some close-ups here, it actually doesn't look like it's very bad. In many cases, you may find a repair that might actually fix this vehicle without addressing these frame rails because they look pretty straightforward on the vehicle. Now, in a little bit here, we're going to put this up on a Celette bench, which is one of the required tools for repairing structural work on Model X. And it's a jig system, and we'll look at it in a minute. And we'll set this on this bench, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, how these rails are out of spec. So, just a quick view of the vehicle partially disassembled, and we're going to walk you through the rest of this in our series. We're getting ready to pull the battery out of this Model X. So this is the one we looked at prior. And we're about to put this up on the bench. We've measured it this morning, and we know we've got some structural damage in the front. So we're going to drop the battery, show you what that looks like, show you what the battery looks like, and then we're going to bench this on a jig system, and then take you through the process of structural repair on a Model X. Here we go. So as you notice, really the battery sits still on the battery table, and we'll raise the vehicle. Now this piece of equipment here is a Tesla-built table. We also have some other pieces of equipment for battery removal for other makes and models. But as we take a look at the bottom of the vehicle, we can see the floorboards. Battery mounting points, you can see the high voltage cables, the rear cross member of the vehicle. Same thing on the front side if we look this way. High voltage connection. We're looking at the front drive unit here. We're looking at the gigacasting attachment here on the front. That's pretty much it. Now let's slide this battery out. Okay, Rich, you ready? Let's just take this out this way. Yeah, we'll go straight. This battery is a couple thousand pounds, maybe 1,600-pound battery. Fairly simple if you have the right tools. So there's Model X battery removed. So next steps for us is we're going to bench this vehicle, and we'll walk you through that process. We've measured the vehicle, and we found some structural damage on this vehicle. So we talked a little bit about the jig system, and in this case, Celette benches, and what actually has to happen to be able to jig this car. So what you're looking at is a Celette bench, and we've got a team here going through assembling the different components to build this jig. So, for example, we're in the process of building one stanchion here, and this stanchion will go on the front end of the frame rack. Some very detailed instructions about what the position of these stanchions or jigs are and how to assemble them. And frankly, it's a few hours worth of work to be able to build these things. We can take a look over here. We've got the front end going together right now. So each position is critical. So on the x-axis of the vehicle, on the y-axis of the vehicle, and on the z-axis of the vehicle. Now, what we're trying to do is identify exactly where in space the vehicle is so that we can make any corrections we need to. I know we've talked about this in the past. One thing that's important to know about Teslas, for example, and a lot of other multi or mixed material constructed vehicles are that you can't pull them. So with an internal combustion engine vehicle or something that's welded together, in a lot of cases, you could put that vehicle on this bench, measure it, and then grab some equipment and pull the frame back into spec. You can't do that with these because of the construction, meaning glue and rivets in many cases. If you start to pull that vehicle, you may bust glue somewhere, and you won't really know until you have another accident and something fails. So most of this, in fact, all of this we're doing here is to be able to set this Model X on this jig, which is simulating the jig that it was assembled on in the factory, so that we know exactly in space where this vehicle is. And when it comes time to replace the damaged structural components, they'll sit exactly where they need to sit based on the design specifications and engineering specifications of the vehicle. So again, very different with electric vehicles. The expense here is frankly enormous, and we can go through that later. What just the cost of this equipment and the hours of time to be able to build this frame rack here. So we're in the process of putting this together. We'll show you some pictures of what it looks like. And then in a minute, well, in an hour or two, we'll slide this under the vehicle and we'll set this on the jig and we'll go from there. So there's a quick look at assembling the jig for this Model X. So more to come. All right, we had to make a quick adjustment to a few fixtures. And now we're going to try again. So let's bring it back down. All right, Rich. Yeah, come on down. Okay, hold on a sec. Okay. All right, hold on one sec. Let's take a peek. Okay, we're good in the back. I'm super close here. All right, so we're now sitting in our jig assembly. And what we know is that we do have some dimensional issues with the vehicle. Yeah. If we look across the car, we can see that all control points that we've set up in this diagnostic mode are good. So our control points here backward are in good shape, but these front control points closest to the accident are not good. So when we take a look at this side, for example, we can see that on the y-axis, we should be about 44 millimeters is the right position, and I'm about 37. So we're looking at about a 7 millimeter issue, which means that this area of the vehicle, this frame rail, has moved that way. If we look at the other side, we should see something similar. Here, we're at about 49, and the y-axis on this side would like us to be at 45 or 44.8. So we're about 6 or 7 millimeters this way. So what we have is some sway in the front end of this vehicle, and both of these frame rails are this way a little bit. So these rails, we can't pull them. If it was an internal combustion engine vehicle or a welded together vehicle, we might put a post on here and just grab them with a frame chain and move them. But we can't do that because of the construction of the vehicle. So these rail assemblies are attached right here, and they are attached with essentially glue and bolts. So a lot easier to replace than a traditional frame rail assembly itself. Probably the hardest part about this is clearing things out of the way and removing the glue. But what we're going to do is replace both of these front sections of frame rails. We can see there's a noticeable sort of deflection on this front rail. This one looks fine, but this appears to be moved a little bit. Here's the interesting thing. If you don't have this equipment, if you don't measure this way, especially on a mixed material construction vehicle, you could probably put this car back together and make the panels fit, and you'd never know that there was structural damage to this vehicle, or it was out of spec. So it's important to make sure that you have the right equipment and the right people fixing these vehicles. So this one looks great, but it's dimensionally off a bit. And so we'll take you through the process. We're going to now, once it's fixtured like this, we're going to take it off of, we're going to remove these and replace these. So some more to come. We'll show you what that looks like in replacing these front frame rails. Okay, so here we are with the Model X. We initially had measured it with our 3D measuring system. We found some damage. Then we fixtured the vehicle on our bench through the jig system. We verified that damage, and we essentially had some rail damage where the front rails were over about 7 millimeters out of spec. So as we said before, you can't pull these vehicles and you have to replace these structural components. So that's where we are right now in the process of replacing structural components. And for example, I'll show you the frame rail. This was the more damaged frame rail, and this now has been removed from the left side or driver's side of the vehicle. And what's left is the gigacasting, or the node where this was fixtured or mounted. You can see the remnants of the factory structural adhesive. It's what they use at the factory is orange in color. And this component is glued and actually bolted through these components. So it's out. And same thing on this side. We've got just the cast aluminum, or the gigacasting structure for this side of the vehicle. And it's actually still a little warm. And we can see the structural adhesive. So what we now have to do next is we're going to replace, and I'm holding the right side, passenger side, frame rail for this vehicle. And this is going to mount in here. And ultimately, we'll take this fixturing system and expand it. So it'll tell us the exact control points as to where this belongs in space. So we know a little bit already about this fixture being in here. But we'll put the maximum number of fixtures on this rail as we attach it. So again, the idea of the fixture is that it will hold this component exactly on the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z, exactly in space according to the engineering spec. So once this is replaced, this will be returned to exactly the engineering specification. And for us, we'll probably return it to even closer to the engineering spec that sometimes may happen at the factory. So in a lot of cases, I think a 3 millimeter tolerance is acceptable. We're going to put it at 0 millimeter tolerance, so this will be right on the money. So more to come on our Model X structural repair and replacement. Next step is to put these in, fixture, make sure we're in the right space, and then we'll go forward from there. So more to come. So rails went in last night, and the structural adhesive has cured, and we've refinished these. And so it's important when you're refinishing to replicate as close as you can the factory look. So clearly at the factory, they don't intentionally paint the inner structure, and it's mostly overspray that falls, and so we do our best, and you can see on this side, to leave that E-coat primer look showing through the white overspray on it. In any case, we've started to pull the jigs apart, or the fixtures, and now we're going to take this thing off of the rack, and we'll put the battery back in, and it's going to start to go forward through the body repair process and get painted. So we're structurally returned to factory specs. So let's pull it up, and we'll detach it from our rack. So go ahead, Rich, we can pull it up. Just keep an eye. Clear, I'm clear, you clear? All right, so there's the separation of the body from the fixturing system. And we're going to slide this out of the way. And we will slide the battery table underneath and get our battery back in and bring this car back to life. Okay, so let's take a look at the Model X. We are now into the up-build stage. We've replaced the frame rails, and what we're doing essentially now is putting the vehicle back together before we go into the paint shop for refinishing, which is prior to the final assembly and testing of the vehicle. So what we're doing basically is getting all the new sheet metal on the vehicle and confirming that we have no other issues that we need to correct prior to going to paint. Obviously, the last thing we want to do is get it painted and then get it reassembled and complete all the calibrations and testing. So just a quick shot of the up-build process, and we'll probably have this thing on its way over to the paint line and then forward to reassembly within an hour or two. And so more to come, but a quick look at the pre-assembly process to confirm everything's in good shape.
So we're out of paint now. We're getting ready to install this glass, and we're going to need to do that before we complete the assembly of the vehicle. So you can use a gantry crane to install these, and as you can see here, we've got quite a few people, both on the inside and on the outside. I'm not sure the exact weight of the Model X glass, but it's easily the heaviest and largest piece of glass in any production vehicle. So the trick to this is to get it exactly right on the first attempt. We only have one shot to position this thing. You may have some movement once it's in, a few millimeters, 1 or 2, up, down, left, right, but you've got to get this exactly right, because you can see that big bead of urethane there is sitting and waiting to accept this windshield. And if you mess that up, especially on a white vehicle, you're going to be in a world of trouble.
Okay, so we've got our Model X out of paint and we're in the reassembly process. So we're going back together on this right now. This one's been super challenging and a lot of communications problems with the vehicle after we brought it out and put it back into reassembly. Starting to put the pieces back together to see what works and what doesn't. So we've cleared a few major obstacles. Some of that was around high voltage and charging systems that were inoperable. And so quite a bit of work. We'll spend a lot of time with engineering to try to sort out what the issues are. So it can be, in some cases, weeks of work to work closely with firmware engineers to try to understand what's happening here. So the good news is we've got this one nearly ready. I think we're still dealing with a passive restraint system issue that we're trying to get corrected. But we're now just sort of approaching the end of the reassembly process. We're going to have to do a bunch of calibration on this vehicle. We had all the glass out and airbags out and doors off and lots of things. But just a quick view in reassembly now, getting close to wrapping this up. I think the important thing to understand on some of these very advanced vehicles is that it's really hard to tell from a sort of an estimating perspective up front what's wrong with the vehicle, because of the interdependency of the systems in these digital EVs. You really don't know until you put things back together, and this is a perfect example. We could see that there was structural damage and we measured for that and repaired it, but only until we start to connect all of these systems do we understand what's going wrong. So, for example, on this we could look at the logs on the MCU and read hundreds and hundreds of different codes. That could scare the hell out of you, frankly, to say, dear God, there's a million things wrong with it. The reality is, it could be one thing. When one system goes wrong, it in many cases sets into effect a series of events that are all sort of related to the parent or grandparent problem, and they start having children. And if you can find the root cause problem and correct it, then all the other problems go away. That's always been a challenge for digital EVs because of that interdependency, and the big challenge we have is when customers come in, their first two questions are how much and how long. In general, the answer is we're not sure. We don't really have a way to know because systems are so interdependent in these things that they have to come up and start to talk to each other before we understand what works and what doesn't work. So more to come on this. We're going to wrap up the final assembly, show you a little bit about calibration, and then we'll kind of review the whole vehicle from there. Hey everyone, it's John at Evolve. Hey, we're here in our delivery row and we're going to take a look at our Model X repair here as we finish it up. But so this is typically the end of a day here as things are getting ready to go home, and here we are ready to go home to the customer. So if you recall, this was quite an extensive repair. We had the windshield out, all of the airbags out, the entire front end of this car was replaced, as well as the front frame rails to be installed on the vehicle. But we can take a look and see that it's perfect. Back together 100%. All of our body gaps are just perfect on the vehicle. We look at the color of the paint and the pearl effect, it's just perfect. So a lot of work in this one, as we have shown you, but just another example of the work done here at Evolve. So if we can help you with any EV issues, questions, service, collision repair, anything, please feel free to reach out and leave comments below. But final look at our Model X front end
and frame rail replacement job. Thanks everybody for watching the channel.